Good afternoon. We're here to visit with Ben Thompson. Ben Thompson, soldier, gunman, gambler, and part-time lawman. Ben Thompson was actually born in Nottingham in the north of England, and he immigrated with his parents into Austin, Texas when he was 8 years old. In his early teens, he began working as a printer, and by the time he got up into his late teens, maybe early 20s, he was working over in New Orleans in a bookbindery. Well, one morning, riding the trolley, there was a gentleman, maybe not so much a gentleman, but was molesting a young lady that was on the trolley. He challenged him to a duel, and the duel took place in an unlighted barn with the doors closed. After a period of time, Ben Thompson emerged from the barn. The other man did not. Well, Thompson moved back to Texas, and about that time, the war between the states broke out, and Thompson joined the Confederacy. He went off to fight, but after a time, he came back to Austin, and he got into an altercation with a mule driver. Well, that led to Thompson killing the mule driver. He was tried for the murder, but not convicted. He went back to fight for the Confederacy again, but when war was over, he came back to Texas and ultimately moved down to Mexico, where he was fighting for Maximilian. Maximilian was fighting Mexican rebels at the time. That lasted until the people in Mexico had all they wanted of Maximilian. They arrested him and executed him, and Thompson came back to Texas. About this time, he decided that Texas might not be the place to be either, and so he went up to Abilene, Kansas, and Oklahoma Territory, where he started, working as a gambler. One thing about him, he was always a fair man. He never cheated at cards, but he was always managing to get into a scrape. He made the acquaintance of people like Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson. All these fellows who we've read about over the years, and he'd actually gotten into an altercation with his brother-in-law, and assaulted him. Well, they got into a fight. The brother-in-law was injured but not killed. As it turns out, Ben was convicted and was sent to prison for 2 years. But that was finally overturned, and he came back to Texas. Well, like I said, he made the acquaintance of Bat Masterson, and Bat Masterson says that if it hadn't been for Ben Thompson, he wouldn't be here today. He would have been killed. So, but Ben Thompson came back to Texas, and he was elected to be the city marshal. In fact, he served 2 terms as city marshal of Austin, Texas. And he opened up a saloon and a gambling parlor. It was known as the Iron Front Saloon. His gambling parlor was up on the 2nd level, and that whole thing was located at 605 Congress Avenue. Of course, there's a big high-rise building there today. Well, Ben decided he'd go off down to San Antonio and meet with some of his contemporaries down there. He met with a fellow by the name of Jack Harris. Jack Harris was the owner, or one of the owners, of the vaudeville theater down there. And one thing led to another. Pistols were drawn, shots were fired, and Jack Harris was killed. Thompson was arrested, but they decided that it was, self-defense, and he was allowed to come back to Austin. At that time, he gave up his lawman position here and continued to operate his saloon and gambling parlor. But a friend of his from down around Uvalde, a fellow by the name of John King Fisher, talked him into going back down to San Antonio to make amends to the men who of the partners of Jack Harris. Well, when they arrived in San Antonio, they went to the vaudeville theater. They were ushered up to the 2nd level, where almost immediately shots were fired, and Ben Thompson was dead on the spot. And here he is today in the Oakwood Cemetery.